I initially picked up the May 1946 issue of Detective Tales to read the John D. MacDonald story Cash on the Coffin. I've recently set myself a new goal to collect as many of John D. MacDonald's short stories as possible. I'm going to do it digitally because I can't afford 75-year-old pulp magazines, especially not the 350 or so it would take to collect all of his short fiction. Speaking of that, not only is it insane that he wrote around 350 to 400 short stories, but what I find most ridiculous is that only about 40 of them have ever been published in book form. That leaves me with another 310 stories to track down. Fortunately, there are a lot of online archives for pulps, but I've been struggling to find most of his stories. Some were published in Esquire, Black Mask, The Shadow, and American Standard, or something along those lines. I can't remember the name of it. I haven't been able to locate any of those online. So far, I'd say I have about a 20% success rate in sourcing his fiction digitally. What I think I'll end up doing is collecting everything I possibly can digitally, and then I'll make an eBay list and wait for good deals on the pulps that I couldn't find digitally. I mean, at this point, I am all in on his fiction. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about me discovering how cool pulp magazines are. For some of you, that won't come as a surprise. You already know pulps are awesome, but I have never taken the time to read one from cover to cover until now. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the entire pulp magazine. I'll give you brief teasers for each story, a little info about each author, share my thoughts on them, and show you some of the amazing artwork inside. This is going to be a lot of fun, so let's get right into it. We're going to start with the magazine itself, Detective Tales, published by Popular Publications. It ran for 18 years. It initially started in 1935 and usually published monthly. The magazine was shut down in 1953 when it merged with New Detective to form 15 detective stories. This is the May 1946 issue, and it contains one of the first stories ever published by John D. MacDonald. I tried to find the name of the artist for the cover. There's no credit in the magazine itself. I'm pretty sure it's Rafael de Soto. It looks like his style, but I can't find any definitive proof. If any of you out there know who the artist is, let me know. I'll pin the comment. The magazine starts with The Crime Clinic, which seems to be something put together by the editor, where he has a guest writer come in that's experienced in the field of crime. This one's written by Frank A. Taylor, a former detective, and it's full of pseudoscience BS that just made me roll my eyes. He talks about how he can tell when someone is a criminal just by their body language and how they supposedly use that knowledge to catch crooks all the time. It just screams confirmation bias. It's the same kind of thing you see today when investigators fixate on the wrong suspect because they fit the profile. I had fun with it because I know it's nonsense, but I do wonder about the people reading it at the time and convincing themselves they could detect criminals just by looking at them. The first story in this collection is The Dark One by Ken Lewis, and it is what inspired me to keep reading this pulp after I finished the John D. MacDonald story. I can't find a lot of info on Ken Lewis online. It just says that he was a pulp writer active in the 40s and wrote crime fiction. And it's like, well, duh, that's why I tried to look him up. The Dark One is a baseball story with a murder mystery. This checks every box I care about. The story starts with the ending, which sounds dumb, but makes sense in the way it's written. The main character is looking back on the event before telling the story of what led up to the murder. It begins in the middle of a baseball game. The lights go out, and just as they come back on, the pitcher on the mound explodes and dies. In this story, we follow Eddie Patrick, a baseball scout, as he recounts the story to the police chief investigating the murder. It starts with him arriving in a company town with a local refinery that supports a minor league team. You see the seedy underbelly of the town, and during his weeks scouting the team, he falls in love with a woman who is in an estranged marriage with the team's star pitcher. The main character is interesting. The baseball side of things is a ton of fun, especially for a baseball nut like me, and I really enjoy how most of the story is just a slice of life that happens to end in a murder. This story is in the running for my favorite in the issue, mostly because it involves baseball, which is always fun. Next, we have Crush Out by D.L. Champion. When I searched for info about him online, I actually found an obituary in the New York Times from March 23rd, 1968. It even gave his home address in New York City, which seems wild. Here's what it looks like today on Google Maps. The obituary also used a very racist slang term for Mexicans in the description of one of his novels. I mean, different times and all that. Here's an excerpt from that article. minus the racist bit. Writing under the name D.L. Champion, he originated The Phantom Detective, which ran in the magazine of that name and was later serialized on radio. His novels included Alias Mr. Death and Run the Wild River. He contributed to leading popular magazines. He was born in Melbourne, Australia, came to the United States as a youth, and served in the British Army in World War I. That's pretty fascinating. Now, Crush Out is a traditional prison escape story where the main character is trying to get out just long enough to get his revenge. The story is very short and has an interesting twist, but you do see it coming from a mile away. So I'm not sure if it's good or not. I just know I had fun while I was reading it. Are any of these stories life-changing? Probably not, but they're great entertainment. On the Ice by Stanley Vickers is one of the best stories in the magazine. As I was going through these, I was like, wow, these are just getting better and better, which will change, and we'll get to that eventually. I couldn't find any information about Stanley Vickers, but I did see that he wrote other stories in pulps such as Dime Detective magazine, and he's in an issue that has another John D. MacDonald story, so I'll be checking that out pretty soon. As I said, On the Ice is one of the best stories in this magazine. It's about a sheriff investigating what appears to be a suicide during an ice fishing trip, but things are not as they appear, and some people start to wonder if the man's stepdaughter might be the actual shooter. The victim had a history of abusing her, and the rumor around town is that she's been looking for a way out. From there, the story is quirky in a way that reminds me of the movie Fargo, and it was awesome to see that even back in 1946, strange stories like this were being published. Up next is There's Murder in the Air by W.T. Ballard. W.T. Ballard was the pen name for Todd Hunter Ballard. He got his start in Black Mask, and after the pulp era began to wane, he wrote a ton of westerns and crime novels. Oh, and Rex Stout, the famous crime writer, was his cousin. There's Murder in the Air is pretty good. It's a lot of fun, but it is filled to the gills with tropes. I think he used every trope that has ever been applied to the crime pulps in just this short story. The story starts with a guy down on his luck, sitting in his car at a fast food drive-in. A beautiful woman appears out of nowhere, runs to his car, and jumps into the passenger seat. She says she's witnessed a murder and needs help. At first, he refuses and tells her to get lost, but eventually he relents and gives her a ride home. The next day, shortly after he wakes up, some local mobsters bust into his apartment and jump him. They start questioning him about the girl. He says he doesn't know who she is, doesn't know anything about her. She jumped out of his car and ran away. Eventually, he gets free after a confrontation with them, and now he's determined to figure out what's going on. The story is fun and takes place in Hollywood. It's one of the longest in the book, and it does a pretty good job of taking you to all the seedy places you'd expect in the LA area, and it has some interesting twists, but as I said, it's trope city. After that, we have a comic strip that talks about the gang wars of the 1920s. It's pretty badass. I'll read one of the passages. Rivalry between the various booze barons reached a peak of reprisal and gore in 1926. Harry Burgess lost his vast East Side beer franchises and his life when he was handed a package purporting to be a cash settlement for the sale of his holdings to his chief competitor, Joe Hirschman, but the package was a time bomb. That's just awesome. The Corpse Drops In by William R. Cox was unreadable. Cox was a prolific writer during the pulp era and went on to write for Hollywood, but I hope his other stories are better than this one. The story is written in carny slang. Yes, I mean carny as in the people who work at carnivals. It's packed with a strange collection of colloquialisms, and the sentence structure makes it nearly unreadable. Maybe it worked at the time, but it didn't work for me. I struggled to follow what was happening, and the dialogue was frustrating at best. The story would have been vastly improved if he had written in a more traditional style and saved the slang for the dialogue, and maybe toned some of the slang down. I don't have anything else to say about it. I didn't understand enough to know what was going on. The Waiting Trap by Richard Brister wasn't much better. It leaned heavily on the stereotypical noir writing you see nowadays when people parody the era. The story is super short, almost flash fiction. I'm going to spoil the entire thing because it's fun, and the actual story redeems the tropey writing. A man trying to get revenge against the sheriff drops a tree onto a road on a hillside. The sheriff crashes into it and then veers off the road and crashes down into the trees in the ditch. The dude then rolls the giant tree limb onto the car with the goal of killing the sheriff. After all that, the sheriff survives, so the man sneaks into the sheriff's house to finish the job. The sheriff has both arms in plaster casts. Just as the man is about to take his revenge, the sheriff shoots him with a gun hidden inside the cast on his arm that wasn't actually broken. What? Seriously? The sheriff had the cast put on to trick him because he knew that guy was going to come get him, which makes no sense because how would the sheriff know who put the tree in the road? But this story is just so convoluted, it ends up being fun. It's ridiculous that the plot hinges on a gun hidden in a cast. One of two things would realistically happen in that situation. If it was a semi-auto handgun, it would jam. If it was a revolver and had enough space to rotate the cylinder, the blast of gas from firing the round would blow off the sheriff's fingers. It's dumb, but who cares? It was fun. The Clock Reads Death by Parker Bonner is another stinker. Now here's the kicker. Parker Bonner was actually a pen name for W.T. Ballard, who I've already talked about. So this guy has at least 2 stories in this issue. I wish it were as good as the first story. I'll give him some credit though. This one reads like it was written by a completely different person. Too bad that person wasn't very good at writing. From the very first sentence, I was scratching my head trying to make sense of the strange criminal lingo the character was using. The opening line is a disaster. Listen to this. Now, Mammy, I know you don't like me to take your new fur coat back that I just got you so you would get out of my hair, but I tell you, I gotta. Holy run-on sentence, Batman. The entire story is like that. I read the first page and a half twice, and I still don't know what was going on. So I just gave up on it and moved on. Finally, we reached the story that inspired me to read this pulp, Cash on the Coffin by John D. MacDonald. For the 2 people watching my video who don't know who John D. MacDonald is, here's a quick bio. MacDonald was a crime fiction writer best known for his amazing Travis McGee series. His career began in the pulps in the mid-1940s, and this story was one of the first he had published after deciding to write full-time. This one isn't bad. It's a step above most of the stories in this issue, though it doesn't stand out like The Dark One or On the Ice. You follow Dugan, a private investigator MacDonald uses in multiple stories across different detective magazines, as he takes on a job working as a witness for a crime boss. The guy offers Dugan a $1,000 bill, yes, those used to exist, to accompany him to a casino where he's been accused of cheating. Things don't go as planned, and Dugan quickly finds himself in deep trouble. He's been accused of murder, and he's handcuffed and doesn't know how he got there. The rest of the story is about him clawing his way out. There's like a mild Deus Ex Machina moment that undercuts the tension at the end, but it wasn't too bad. Considering this is one of MacDonald's earliest works, I can cut him some slack. Just like that comic book, there's another 1-page feature called Oddities in Crime. It's just wild. It lists supposedly true crime stories, though I doubt most of them are real. One is about a guy killing a woman with a hammer, and another is about a French woman who supposedly turned an island prison into a palace of vice. And after that, we get Sheriff Lovatt's Death Watch by Henry Norton. This feels like the story that had the most time put into it. It also carries a unique, cynical tone that far exceeds what you see in the rest of the issue. I couldn't find any information on Henry Norton. I wish there was a better online archive for this kind of material, not necessarily the stories themselves, but biographies about the writers from these pulps, because a lot of them, there's no information. Maybe it was a pen name, who knows? Unless the author has like a diehard fan base that is still around today, you're not going to find information about them online, and it is very frustrating for someone like me trying to make a video about it. If any of you out there know of a good resource for finding out biographies on pulp authors, please let me know in the comments. Anyways, this story follows Sheriff Lovatt. I'm going to mispronounce his name. Oh well. He has been the czar of a rural county outside Portland, Oregon for nearly 25 years. In that time, crime was almost non-existent because Lovatt knows how to think and act like a criminal. He believes the only thing stopping a good person from breaking the law is the fear of getting caught. So he makes sure everyone in his county knows they won't get away with anything. I enjoyed this story quite a bit. The cast is too big for a piece this short, but I understand why everyone's there. It begins with a wealthy man begging Lovatt to find out who threatened to kidnap one of his kids. Right away, Lovatt knows the man isn't telling the whole truth, so he decides to do things his own way and figure out the real story. The more I think about this one, the more I like it. I won't spoil the twists, but they're really good. Another thing that I really liked about this story is kind of where you are in the world feels different. Like, it feels like you're in a rural part of Oregon. Most of these stories just feel like they could take place anywhere, or they just default to LA or New York City. But this one, there's just something about the way it's written that really feels like you're there. I think this might be my favorite. That's it for the stories, but before I wrap up this video, I want to talk about the ads in this issue. Most of them are for Learn by Mail vocational schools, which honestly sounds kind of cool. I do wonder if they were a scam or not. My favorite ad is the Ever Ready battery ad at the beginning of the magazine. It's got solid advice and some great artwork. I wish we still got ads like that. I'd take those any day over today's clickbait AI slop designed by psychologists to make us feel inadequate. There's even a corny little comic strip to sell Gillette razors. The story isn't anything special, but it's fun to read. And as a Pepsi enjoyer, I definitely appreciated spotting one of their ads tucked into one of the stories. Am I getting a little too high on nostalgia for a time I wasn't alive to experience? Maybe. Do I care? Not one bit. Sitting down with these old crime pulps from the 40s is a great way to just detach. You can check out mentally for a while and have a good time. Were any of these stories literary revelations that made me a wiser, better person? Absolutely not. But they brought me a lot of joy as I read them every night before bed. I think everyone should give Pulp magazines a try. There were pulps for everything. Science fiction, fantasy, sports, westerns, crimes, and just about anything else under the sun. Grab one online at a place like the Internet Archive and take a little trip into the past. I don't think you'll regret it. Let me know in the comments if you read pulps. I'm always open to suggestions, especially for when the John D. MacDonald well finally runs dry. Thanks for watching. And with that, I'll see you next time.